Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have this almost magical control over their surroundings without even saying a word? They don't raise their voice, they don't beg, they just quietly pull back, and suddenly the whole vibe changes. People start wondering, chasing, feeling uneasy. Now, imagine if you did the same. What would happen if you stopped reacting on autopilot to everything? If you chose silence over blurting out a response, retreat over lashing out, how would things shift? That's really the key. When you stop being constantly available emotionally, physically, mentally, the world around you almost goes into a mini panic. People are used to steering you with your own reactions, your impulses, your predictability. But the moment you decide to step back, the game flips. Suddenly, people who thought they had you all figured out realize they actually don't know you at all. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So, think about this. When you become less reachable, who gets desperate? Who gets annoyed or tries to poke at you just to get a reaction? It reveals a lot more about them than it does about you. And honestly, it shows how much you're still being manipulated without even realizing it. You keep giving yourself away to keep the peace, to avoid losing people who, deep down, were never really with you in the first place. Every forced yes, every knee-jerk reply, every emotional reaction, those are little pieces of your energy slipping away. And at the end of the day, what's left? Exhaustion. Frustration. That weird emptiness you can't quite put into words. Here's the reason: you're too available for people who deign to even deserve a second of your silence. But this isn't about shutting out the world. It's about choosing yourself. It's about starting what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming your truest, most whole self. And that begins with understanding that sometimes silence is more powerful than 1,000 arguments. That withdrawing, when it comes from a place of awareness, not avoidances, an act of strength. So let me ask you, how much longer are you going to let other people's emotions run your life? How long will you keep reacting like a puppet every time someone pushes your buttons? Maybe it's time to snip those strings, to pull back, to become a little bit mysterious. Because when you stop being so available, everything shifts. Since you were a kid, you've been taught to always show up, to answer fast, to say yes. When you really want to say no, you've been conditioned to believe your worth is measured by how accessible you are to everyone else. But here is something people rarely say out loud. Being overly available isn't a virtue, it's a cage. And as long as you think you have to be constantly on call, emotionally or otherwise, you will keep getting used, drained and forgotten the moment you're no longer useful. Why? Because being always available makes you predictable. Anything predictable becomes a tool. People start treating you like their personal emotional first aid kit there when they need comfort or validation, and back on the shelf when they're done. But you don't notice, because you're caught in the trap of thinking if you're always there for everyone, someone will finally be there for you. But that's just not how it works. But the more you put yourself at the center of everyone else's lives, the more you disappear from your own. Being available all the time is a sneaky form of self-abandonment, a way of chasing approval, avoiding rejection, trying to control how others see you. But that control costs you your peace. Your energy gets scattered, as if it's unlimited, when really, it's not. People who expect you to be endlessly available don't actually want you, they want what you provide. Validation, distraction, emotional comfort. But when you change, when you set a boundary, when you stop reacting, those same people get annoyed, call you strange, not because you changed, but because you're no longer useful to them. And here's the harsh truth. The more available you are, the less people value you. What's always there becomes invisible. Nobody respects what they don't have to earn. So take a second and really ask yourself, who actually deserves your time, your energy, your attention, or maybe, who deserves your absence? What's really behind that automatic urge to reply, justify, and please everyone around you? The answer is rooted in what Carl Jung called psychic energy, and that is exactly where we re-headed next, because your energy is your most valuable asset. If you don't learn to protect it, someone else will use it for their own benefit. If this is resonating with you, hit that subscribe button and join the channel. Thanks for your support. Jung didn't see the human mind as some machine that just reacts to every little thing without consequence. He saw it as an energy system. Every thought, every emotion, every action costs you a bit of that energy. The real question is, are you deciding where your energy goes, or are you letting the world decide for you? Every time you react impulsively, you bleed out psychic energy. When you defend yourself against a criticism that doesn't even deserve your attention, when you snap back at a provocation just to prove a point, when you get pulled into pointless arguments, when you try to please people who don't actually appreciate you, respending your inner strength on things that don't nourish you, and as Jung said, what you resist persists. The more you react, the more you get stuck in the same cycle. People who feel emotionally drained aren't weak, they're just misdirecting their energy.
And do you know what happens to someone who's always exhausted? They become vulnerable. When you're worn down, you're easy prey. Manipulative, opportunistic, and emotionally needy people can sense it.
They notice you don't know how to guard your energy, that you react to everything. It's that you're always trying to fix everyone's problems, and they take advantage. Jung believed a healthy psyche is one that knows how to keep energy within the system. That means knowing how to say no without feeling guilty, knowing how to stay silent without feeling like a coward, knowing how to pause and observe before acting. Real power doesn't come from reacting. It comes from choosing when and how to act. And that's only possible when you know yourself well enough to recognize your own impulses. How many times have you lost sleep over a conversation that didn't end well? How many hours have you wasted replaying what you should have said or wondering why someone treated you badly? That's your energy being drained with nothing to show for it. You're keeping old ghosts alive, feeding toxic patterns just because you keep responding. Psychic energy is like a force field. When it's protected, it gives you presence. You can walk into a room and command respect without even opening your mouth. But if you don't manage it well, you become invisible, reactive. The world has no mercy for those who always give in. So start paying attention to your own triggers. What makes you react without thinking? What throws you off balance? Those are the exact spots where your energy leaks out. That's where your work begins. Not to become cold or distant, but to become selective, to take ownership of yourself. Here's one of Jung's biggest insights. When you conserve your energy, you break free from the projections that others place on you. And trust me, that upsets people because now you stepping into the shadows of something no one likes to talk about. Silent manipulation. Next, we're going to dive into how opportunistic people feed off your energy and why your unavailability totally throws off their game. Get ready to look right into the eyes of those who have been draining you often without you even noticing. You might think you're in control, that your reactions are your own choices. But the truth is, most of your emotional responses are programmed. And people who know how to spot that can manipulate you with ease. They don't need to yell or force anything. They just push the buttons you've left exposed, and you react every single time. Jung called this projection the psychological mechanism where people unload onto others what they can accept in themselves. But here's the twist. While others are projecting onto you, you become a blank canvas for all their expectations. And the more emotionally available you are, the easier it is for people to paint their own stories over your life. You know that friend who only calls when they're in crisis? That partner who always wants you to rescue them? That person who flatters you only when it serves their needs? None of this is random. They not connecting with the real youth. They reconnecting with the role you agree to play. And why do you keep playing it? Because deep down, you're afraid to disappoint, afraid not to be loved, afraid of being abandoned. The most powerful manipulation doesn't happen through shouting. It happens in the quiet weight of guilt when you feel like you owe someone, when you believe you have to be available. To help to understand even as it drains you inside, and here is the heart of it, the manipulator docen. Need to control you directly, they just need you to keep reacting the same way. But the moment you stop reacting, everything changes. When you start saying no, when you answer with silence, when you Drawing back, instead of explaining yourself, the projections start to fall apart. The mask people put on you slips away, and suddenly, they feel unsettled. They don't know who you are anymore. Even scarier for them, they might have to face themselves. And not everyone is ready for that. Your unavailability becomes a threat because it forces others to confront their own emptiness. The silence you bring exposes the internal chaos they've been avoiding. That's when the pushback comes, the criticism, the drama, the guilt-tripping. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped being their convenient mirror. Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw and stop feeding the cycle, the other person's shadow starts to come out, and that's unbearable for those who always used you as their escape. But what about you? You ready to handle that discomfort? The possibility of being misunderstood, rejected, or even attacked just for protecting your own space? Are you ready to face the silence that follows when you finally break the pattern? Because it's in that silence, right after the rupture, that a new kind of strength is born. Let's talk about that. In the next part, you'll understand why silence can be the most powerful tool of the human psyche, and how it changes everything between you and the world. We live in a noisy world. Everyone wants to be heard, wants to clap back instantly, wants to win every argument even, if it costs them their own peace. But there's a different power, one that's rare and rarely mastered, the power of silence. And I'm not talking about silence as weakness or avoidance, but as conscious, strategic, brutally clear silence, the kind that isn't emptiness, but presence amplified. Jung saw silence not as a void, but as fertile ground for inner transformation. When you stop reacting, you start observing. And when you observe, you begin to see patterns you never noticed before repeating emotions. Manipulation games, cycles of self-sabotage. Silence creates clarity, and clarity is dangerous for anyone who wants to control you. Have you ever noticed how some people freak out when you don't respond? When you don't explain? When you just disappear? It's rarely because they miss you. It's because your silence takes away their ability to control the story. As long as you're talking, you're still playing their game. But when you go quiet, you change the rules, and that shakes up anyone who depends on your reaction. True silence isn't just the absence of words, it's mastery over your own energy. It's refusing to be dragged into someone else's emotional storm. It's choosing not to fight battles that aren't worth your energy. Jung taught that individuation, the process of truly becoming yourself, requires some distance. Because only in silence can you actually hear yourself, without all the world's interference. But don't get me wrong, silence comes with a price. It'll separate you from people who only valued you for what you did for them. It'll make you seem mysterious, or even cold, to those who never really saw you as a person, just as a role. You might seem arrogant or distant, but that's just their reaction to losing access to your energy. Here's the tough truth. As you mature, you get more selective with your words. You realize every sentence is an investment of your energy, and not everyone deserves access to your truth. Sometimes silence isn't withdrawal. It's sovereignty. It's the language of someone who no longer needs to convince or prove anything to anyone. Silence can be uncomfortable, because it forces others to sit with their own thoughts and inner chaos. And that discomfort reveals more about them than any argument ever could. You don't have to explain your absence, it's self-explanatory. The people threatened by your silence are the ones who are relying on your imbalance to keep themselves steady. But the most powerful silence isn't the one that unsettles others. It's the silence that rebuilds you from the inside. The silence that reconnects you with something deeper than anyone else's approval. It's in that quiet, away from everyone else's demands, that you start to get your energy back, to remember who you really are, Don. And that what we'll cover next, because it's not enough to just cut out external noise. You need to learn how to use your energy with intention, to choose where it goes, where it stays, and most importantly, where it should never be wasted. If you on this path, reclaiming your energy and setting boundaries, you'll get a lot out of my book, Beyond the Shadow. It breaks down Jung's most transformative insights and gives you practical tools to protect your energy, set boundaries, and reconnect with your authentic self. You'll find the link in the pinned comment. But none of this matters if, in real life, you keep saying yes when you want to say no. Keep replying to messages that drain you. Keep engaging in empty conversations and maintaining relationships that only exist out of habit. Awareness without action is just another form of self-deception. Real transformation happens when you make the decision to become selective, and that takes emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability isn't about being cold, arrogant, or indifferent. It's about not letting yourself be accessible to just anyone at any time for any reason. It's about reclaiming your energy, your time, and your peace. And this starts with simple, everyday actions. Don't respond right away. Pause and breathe before you react. Step away from a heated conversation before it pulls you under. Turn off your phone without guilt. Say not today, not interested, or I'm not getting involved. But here is what matters most. You don't need to justify your absence or explain your silence. You owe nothing to anyone but yourself. For many, that's unforgivable because when you stop explaining, you take away their ability to keep you locked in the role of the always helpful, always understanding one. Carl Jung knew that every process of individuation passes through a phase of isolation, a sad or depressive isolation. It's a time of pulling back, where you learn to hear your own voice again, without the world's noise. This is where you rebuild your identity, not from how others see you, but from your own core. Want to know a good measure of your growth? Watch who starts to distance themselves when you get more reserved. Notice who tries to trigger you when you stop reacting. Pay attention to who accuses you of changing when you finally start to protect yourself. These are signs you redoing something wrong. They reproof you, restarting to break free. At first, being unavailable is uncomfortable. You'll feel guilty, maybe even selfish. You'll hear that you're being too harsh. But that's just part of the process. You've spent your whole life being taught to put yourself second. So it's natural that this shift feels strange, not just for you, but for everyone who benefited from the old you. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. Every time you say no to the world, you're saying yes to yourself. When you remove yourself from a toxic environment, you're telling the universe your peace is worth more than fake connections. And when you stop explaining yourself, that's when people start to respect you, even if it's only a few. Not everyone will be ready for this new version of you. Your emotional absence will force others to see wounds they've been ignoring. It will show just how much they relied on your chaos to feel in control. And that's when the rupture happens. Alone with the pain, the loneliness, the sense of loss. But in reality, you're not losing anything. You're setting yourself free. So what happens after the distance? What comes from the silence? Let us talk about that, about the rebirth that only happens when you have the courage to be misunderstood, to be alone, and to become whole on your own. It has time to understand why the loneliness of the strong is actually the path to true freedom. When you stop being available to everyone, something deep starts to shift. First comes silence, an uncomfortable silence that echoes inside. You might question if you did the right thing, if you're being too harsh, if you're losing people who actually cared. But slowly this silence changes, starts to clean you out, to calm you down, to heal you. After silence comes solitude, not the emptiness of being alone, but the fullness of being present with yourself. It's the solitude of the strong, of someone who no longer betrays themselves just to keep others close. In that space where there was once noise and confusion, clarity moves in. Where there was anxiety, peace settles. Where there was neediness, a new strength emerges, the strength of being whole within your own skin. Jung said that individuation, the journey to becoming who you really are, means stepping away from the crowd, letting go of the mask, and walking alone for a while. That's exactly what you're doing when you choose unavailability. You're not running from the world, you're returning to yourself. You stop reacting and start creating. You're no longer shaped by your circumstances. You begin to shape your reality from the inside out. People who get uncomfortable with your absence, they reveal that they never really wanted you, they wanted the part you played. Now that you're no longer playing along, they don't know what to do. And that's freeing. Yes, you will lose people, but you will find yourself. You'll leave behind places that no longer fit, but reconnect with your true essence. You'll be misunderstood, but you'll finally be respected, because when you're no longer available for everything, you'll become valuable, rare, unforgettable. And don't be fooled, this is a rebirth, a new beginning, and the true foundation of your power. Beginning, the start of a life where you're no longer settling for emotional crumbs, no longer playing mind games, no longer mistaking emptiness for affection. From now on, you only accept what aligns with your peace, your truth, your sense of wholeness. And if you've made it this far, it's because some part of you is already ready for this new chapter. Deep down, you've realized that being loved means nothing if it requires you to abandon yourself. Real self-love starts when you choose yourself, Evan, if that means being alone for a while. So let me ask, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, or even disliked, all for the sake of your inner freedom? Are you willing to pay the price of being truly yourself? If this message hit home, if it made you reflect, drop "I choose my peace" in the comments. Let's see how many here are ready to make this shift. And don't forget, keep watching the next video. It's more important than you think. I'll see you there.